The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. All the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
This is News Talk.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then.
What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Oh!
Now you're welcome along to Football Show. Coming at you. Arsenal, very much top of the table. Their lead is intact, 4-1 wins apiece for Arsenal and Manchester City over the weekend. But that doesn't tell the full story of everything going on. Let's bring in Pat Nevin. Good evening, hello.
Good evening, how are you doing, Joe?
Yeah, great. Let's start with Graham Potter. In some ways, I blame myself for believing this was going to be any different. So 159 days, 31 games in charge. 11th defeat on Saturday was one too many for the Chelsea hierarchy, and they brought the curtain down on Graham Potter. And reasonable man that he is, he didn't push hard for his full payout. He took what's been described as a market rate. So again, dignified, to a fault, to the end. The vision which the club painted initially was of a holistic long-term approach, hence the 5-year deal for Potter. And yet here we are, 2 managers sacked inside a year. They're doing a damn good imitation of the previous regime, you know.
No, better than an imitation. Much more vicious.
Yeah.
You know, it is funny because, first of all, don't blame yourself. Blame me, because I felt the same way. I really kind of hoped they would give it a go and give it plenty of time to see if this model can work. Because we know the other model tends to work. You throw a hell of a lot of money, a hell of a lot of big name players have already made it, and you'll do quite well. That's how the models work in football generally. Others tweak it a bit and it works quite well for a while. I give you Brentford, certainly Brighton at the moment. But in the longer term, those who spend the most money in the big names, the ones that are already established players, tend to do very, very well and get a big name manager up there as well. And don't worry about overdeveloping, from beneath. And I just wanted to see how this would go if you stuck with it. Now, I fully understand that's, when they come in, they thought to themselves, we are going to be different. And they really wanted to be. I'm convinced they did want to be. But the pressure tells in the Premier League. And then you start looking at the balance sheet. And the balance sheet doesn't look good if you're not in the Champions League. And if you look a long way for it. And if you're beginning to see the same sort of problems every other week, or maybe every week. Chelsea at the weekend there, 25 shots at goal, right? Which is an improvement from where they had been before, because a bit shot shy before that. However, Aston Villa had 2 shots on target, and Aston Villa won 2-0. So that sort of thing has been happening, not to that extent, but a lot of time with Chelsea, and it wasn't really improving that much. So I can understand why they thought, look, we've got to get somebody who's got that little bit more ruthlessness to come in. I suspect that's what they're going to do. I don't know if they decide to get another manager who will go for the holistic approach. Good luck there, because you'll get the same problems again. Because if you're going to go for that sort of approach, you're going to have to be very patient. And patience isn't 5 or 6 weeks or 7 months even. Patience is a year or two to build it. You think about it, how many managers really at the very top level get that level of patience? I actually think Pep got a bit, funnily enough. But apart from that, in the English Premier League, it kind of doesn't happen. And I think the owners at Chelsea have just figured that one out.
Graham Potter didn't do a good job. He underperformed. Chelsea underperformed, there is no doubt. And yet, I don't blame him in many ways, because Graham Potter, he fits the profile of what they're aspiring to be. So they want stable, they want sensible, they want logical, they want to follow a process of improvement. Graham Potter is all of those things, and yet the club behaved like they were nouveau riche on steroids. I mean, on steroids. So just to give you the signings under Todd Bowley, and I'm sure I'm going to forget several. Enzo Fernandez, 107 million sterling. Mudryk, 62 million. Badiashile from Monaco, 33 million. Madueke, 30 million from Eindhoven. Gusto from Lyon, 26 million. Audrey Santos from Vasco da Gama, 11 million. David Fofana from Molde, 10 million. João Felix on loan. Wesley Fofana, 70 million. Who could forget Cucurella for 55 million sterling, and that is set to rise. One would almost forget about Raheem Sterling, 48 million. Koulibaly, 33 million. Chukwuemeka, 15 million, set to rise. Castay for 12 million. Solinia for 12 million. Some bloke called Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and on we go. They behaved like children in a toy shop, and yet they got the type of manager whose modus operandi goes against all of that. So in some respects, it's easy to blame Potter, and he didn't do a very good job. The club could not have misaligned things more acutely if they had tried.
If you look back, I often use David Moyes as one of the examples, the amount of time he got at Manchester United, and he was told, you've got a long time, get it right, and of course he didn't. And that's just the way it is. I suspect Potter thought, okay, you and here's the question. You or I got all these young players, right? So we don't even know who was the decision maker in the players. But if you're thinking to yourself, I've got 3 or 4 years, okay, I'll deal with the young ones. Some of them will come on quickly, some less so. Enzo, he's fine, he's a good player, it's going to be okay. I'd say Fofana at the back's fine. Badiashile, already turning into a decent player. Other than that, and by the way, not the finished products, and you won't know the answer to them for 2-3 more years. Other than that, the rest of them, no idea. Can't tell you if they're going to be good enough. I wouldn't have expected to be able to tell you if they'd all be good enough. And there's been disappointments in the midst of that as well. If every one of them was the suggestion of Graham Potter, we're all blaming Graham Potter for saying, well, wait a minute, come on. You need to get somebody who wins you games in the short term.
Yeah.
But if that was the thinking, and it looked awfully clear to me that's what the thinking was, get a whole young side and build them and grow them together, and that takes a little bit of time. So I think that's why there's a lot of sympathy. And there's not a great deal at Stamford Bridge, certainly after the game the other night. There wasn't a huge amount of sympathy because they're used to winning. And there was a couple of tactical things that just felt so wrong. Lots of people have been talking about it, but you put Reece James at the right centre back, and when in actual fact you've got another centre back you can stick there, you can put Reece James where he's good, and that's what has made Chelsea good for a while now. Chilwell one side, Reece James the other, both of them flying forward. So some of the tactical decisions, you thought, even the ones that looked interesting weren't working good enough. So when you put it all together, if you're going to treat them the same way you would treat most managers at Chelsea, and to be fair at quite a few other clubs, you probably have given them to the end of the season and maybe a wee start, but not much more than that, because there wasn't enough points, there wasn't enough goals, you weren't getting enough out of even your other players like Sterling. Hardly anything out of him. Mudryk, I've watched Mudryk a lot. He can play. Doesn't look like it at the moment because he's playing, who knows, without confidence, without understanding the league, who knows. So there's enough players in there, and as many people have said, I think we all agree there's a good team in there somewhere. There is a good team in there somewhere, but whether that good team is a good team now or whether that's a year or two. So, whether Potter's to blame, it's kind of neither here nor there now. I think what Todd Bowley and the rest of the group now know, right, this is hard. This isn't dead simple. This isn't, as you suggest, kids in a sweet shop, go and buy all the best, and then you walk away with a league. It's a wee bit more complicated than that. And, do you know many owners that come in that haven't been that involved in football? They get everything right. No, they don't. But a lot of their mistakes have been pretty costly mistakes.
Mm. And those tactical decisions that you mentioned there of Potter's, they often happen towards the end of a tenure when the brain is scrambled, and it probably was, plucked from somewhere at 4 a.m. as he stared at the ceiling trying to figure this thing out. He was frayed increasingly. You could see it physically in his demeanour. So whilst I put the blame 99.9% at the door of Bowley and the Chelsea hierarchy, I understand their decision to pull the plug on Potter now. I mean, it had turned toxic. They had to get rid of him.
Yeah, I think a few weeks ago I said it'll be interesting to see how brave they are, the kind of cojones they have, because they're going to need them.
Yeah. And
you really need them. And it's a classic one. It's when the fans are having a go at the players, it's fine. When the fans are having a go at the manager, it's fine. See, when they start turning towards the board, you're knackered. You're in trouble. And not just the fans, but the media as well, saying, well, wait a minute. And as soon as that happens, almost every single time that I can remember in my life, they both think, oh, wait, we don't like that very much. We better go and get another manager. So the next, it's harsh to call it a flat catcher, but the next guy will come in and you won't be thinking about anyone else except the new manager for, 6-9 months? That'll be where the core of your thoughts are. Is he doing the right thing tactically? Is he picking the right players? Is he getting the best out of them? And all that everything else you're thinking above that, that'll all disappear again as soon as they get a new manager in. And that's what tends to happen with boards. I know I've watched it. I've been in sideboard rooms when it happens. It's, managers can take that sort of stress a lot of time. Graham didn't look as good as some others, maybe because of the ego isn't quite the same as some others. And the ego you have to have if you're a Chelsea manager is extraordinary.
He is a dignified, reasonable, admirable man operating in an undignified, unreasonable industry. I
would call it business.
It's grotesque and illogical, and he's far too accommodating. I mean, his entire backroom team are going to stay. Again, he's not looking for his full payout. All of these things. I mean, on the one hand, you would say, geez, as a human being, that is very admirable. But in the shark-infested waters of football, you can kind of see why he almost got eaten up. And the leaks have started. The leaks do tend to start. So word seems to be players, after bad 45 minutes, would sit in the dressing room anticipating in trepidation Thomas Tuchel kicking down the door and telling them those standards have not been met, etc. And they anticipated similar from Potter, and he would come in and it was very pleasant. And again, that's on them. In so many respects, that's on them, but it allowed standards to slip a touch. Where do you think Potter goes from here? Like, how damaging is this for his credentials? Will he get a Champions League type job of a club of Chelsea stature again in the short term, Pat, do you think?
Does he want it? I'm not sure.
Really?
I'm honestly not sure. If you looked at somewhere, if Southampton went down or Leicester went down or something like that, you would say, yeah, he's a good manager. He can work well at a certain level, and certainly without that pressure on every single week. I was going to say every week, every 3 or 4 days. He's shown that he's a very, very capable manager. By the way, the backroom staff staying is kind of odd, because that's not going to last. They'll stay until the new manager comes in, and then he'll decide who he wants. That's the way that one works. But the fact that he's kind of liked within the game, that he has got some success behind him, in certain areas. But I think when he takes the next club, he doesn't want one that's expecting you to win everything right away. He's wanting to build again. That's what he wants. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did it, and he did it well. And like yourself, I want the good guys to do well. But it's a kind of... A lot of people who would be very good managers aren't good managers or don't go in for management because they know they've not got the right personality for it. You need to believe you've got that sort of incredible, extraordinary self-belief. By the way, going back to that point you made about, you know that Tuchel's going to come in and he's going to have a major sense of humour failure. That's not modern management techniques, right? People kind of glare at you if you talk about that now. I mean, I don't want to sound too woke, and in fact, it's impossible for me to sound woke. But people will say you should never do that. That's not how you get the best out of people. But we kind of know it is sometimes.
It is.
And we do.
Yeah, I don't think Klopp or Pep or Tuchel are coming into dressing rooms when standards haven't been met and taking it well.
No, absolutely, and you're right. And they saw the way that he worked, and they thought, well, that's a modern way, and if you look, almost an American way. That's the way that they work to get the best out of people. See, that's a different model. But it's also a different culture. The culture in football is quite extraordinary. And if you've been in whatever basketball or baseball or whatever, it will be incredibly, difficult. But there was some classic lines where a lot of people have said that if you have a bad time in the league over in America in any of the top games, the gridiron game, you name it, it's okay. Just play all the same games next year. Don't do that here. No. You're relegated. You're in trouble. So it's a different dynamic. You can't afford it. And the dynamic is always so tight because, so few teams are seen as successful. You must be top 4 if you're one of the major players, or else it's a stinker of a season. And at the moment, looking where Newcastle are going, looking where Manchester United should be going with the money they get. Man City, Arsenal are getting better all the time. Liverpool will come back. I understand why they're thinking, whoa, we could be left behind here for a few years. And if you're left behind for a few years, everyone knows you don't get Champions League money. And suddenly that financial fair play, it becomes a bit of a headache.
Well, just a last one on Chelsea. Under previous iterations, be that Roberto Di Matteo or Avram Grant or even Tuchel, a manager will come in, pick up the pieces, and Chelsea will find themselves in a European Cup final. They have that curious aspect to their DNA, and they have talent. I mean, you just can't spend that much money, even that stupidly, and not end up with some talent. So they have talent. A new manager could come in and make sense of it and tell 20 of the squad you're not involved in training for most of the time. That is all very possible if they get the right man. They have Real Madrid in about 10 days' time.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to that game because if Chelsea play the way they've been playing just now against the way Real Madrid have been in Europe, particularly at Liverpool, at Anfield, you think, oh dear, what a shame. It's going to be a wee bit. You're going to be watching through the fingers at that point in time. But you're right. I mean, if and these are mighty ifs, right? They start now, but say they start finding the goal. It's still a big if because there's no absolute natural goal scorer there. If you can get the best out of one or two, like Mudryk starts playing the way he's capable of playing. But more importantly, you need to be able to get the best out of Reece James, who's in and out with injuries. Still missing games, still in and out, still problematic for him to get back to where he was before. Then if you manage to get N'Golo Kante, who just had a little moment back on the pitch, and remember, that's like having an extra man on the pitch. That's like having 12 men on the pitch. Still big if. It's another huge if. The other huge if is you need Thiago Silva back there. Now, if you put him back in this centre-back position and a couple beside him, yeah, you have a look at Chelsea's numbers this season with the goals they give away. They don't give away many goals. Very, very few. It was unusual to give away two at the weekend there. So if you're a team that gives away very, very few goals and you're in a knockout competition, yeah, you've got a chance. You've absolutely got a chance. But it's still an outside chance. And I think it was only 7 ifs there.
Yes, yeah. Brendan Rodgers continues the record-breaking season on the managerial sacking front. The previous record being 10 managers sacked in a single season. We're now at 13 as of this weekend. So Rodgers goes via mutual consent. The Crystal Palace game at the weekend made it 7 games and no win. His contract did take him up to 2025. He's 50 years old, Brendan Rodgers, and I think has generally proven himself as a coach. His next step could be interesting. Something funny with Leicester. I don't know to what extent Leicester will be held against him. He was speaking many months ago about being unhappy with the makeup of the squad. There seem to be some financial fair play concerns as well. They're going to lose Tielemans, who's out of contract in the summer, and Maddison, it seems, is going to be sold in the summer as well. So I'm not sure what the medium-term outlook is for Leicester. But what about Rodgers? Where might he pitch up, do we think, Pat?
I think Rodgers might be in a better position than Leicester at the moment. With the amount of clubs that change the manager so quickly now, he will not be out of a job. He won't be lacking for offers really quite soon. It takes a little bit of time off and sits and watches it for a wee while. You talk about the massive numbers of sackings this year. I think a major reason for that is the weirdness of this season. From Palace downwards. That's a lot of teams that are panic-stricken, absolutely panic-stricken. And of course, if you're one of the big clubs, you're looking up, and if you're not in the top 4, you're panic-stricken too. It's a really, it's always stressed and it's always pressure, but at the bottom this season, it's more extreme than usual. So if you're losing 10, 12, 14 maybe by the end of the season, managers every season, Brendan Rodgers is going to be okay. He can sit there and wait for the next one. Because it's amazing how good you suddenly become when you've been out of work for a wee while. People are having a kind of a sideways glance at you. I mean, quite a lot of people forget this now, were questioning Thomas Tuchel the way he was going, at the end of his Chelsea time. And obviously he's a top manager, and to be honest, you look at him, if he walked back into Chelsea instead of going where he's gone just now, you say he'd probably do a good job there. But it's amazing, you took a few months out, and these managers, we know it's a merry-go-round, and he will get another opportunity. But I think he can sit with his feet up for a wee while and just wait for it. I think he'll get another Premier League one. I absolutely do. I think he'll get another Premier League one. He just needs to wait till the right one comes along, and that probably won't be very long. Maybe next season.
Because I saw him link with Spurs. I mean, is that the kind of level he might pitch at, do you think? Or is that a touch elevated?
He might think he would want to get Chelsea because he's got history there. But it's anything can happen here, because the amount of sort of positions that need to be filled, that looks as if they're going to be filled or might be changed again next year again, it is extraordinary. I mean, I do think there are managers out there that sit and think, yeah, why wait? Pochettino decided to wait a wee while. What's the panic? They're not skin. They can wait for the right one as opposed to just dive in and panic. And time's gone past some managers. If you've done a couple of jobs at that level and done okay with Winnerall, I think a lot of people just say, right, okay, his time will come again. And that's just the way it works. Absolutely just the way it works. And it's kind of strange, though, because you do want people to take the odd chance with somebody out with the normal. But then, isn't that what Chelsea did with Potter to some degree? And it kind of didn't work. So he's one of the trusted ones, because he's got history with Celtic, and Liverpool had good times with Leicester as well. He's got good history. He'll be back.
I do want to talk to you about the actual football as well, so we'll do that in just a moment. Pat Nevin is staying with us. Our football show coverage is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Back with Pat Nevin in just one moment.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk. Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk.
You're very welcome back. Pat Nevin is with us. We're reviewing the Premier League weekend that was. We've dealt with the managerial sackings. Let's go to where the weekend started. Manchester City 4, Liverpool 1. There are times we bemoan Pep's tinkering, and there are other times where it's just bloody interesting to watch, and it seems to work very well too. So if people miss the game, you can expand on all this, but in the main, it was, for a lot of the game, Ake and Ruben Dias and Akanji as a back three. John Stones was in midfield, although he would venture into the defensive line as well, but he spent plenty of time in midfield next to Rodri, and it was sort of like a square with Stones, Rodri, De Bruyne, Gundogan. It was Mahrez on the right-hand side. It was Jack Grealish, who says, I really feel myself again, and he was quite brilliant, it must be said, on the left-hand side. And it was Alvarez through the middle, given the absence of Haaland. And Liverpool couldn't cope with this. Whatever way this all, swirl it together in a pot worked for Man City, it was really lovely to watch. They were as fluid maybe as they've been in some time.
Yeah, I was trying to think, was it a 3-2-4-1, or was it three in a box and two wide and one up front? And Stones, where the hell are you playing? Sorry, where? But he does that now and again. He gets a player. There's been a couple of ones that have done it, different ones. Zinchenko did it for a while, didn't he?
Yeah.
And Cancelo did it for a while. You think, I don't really know where you're playing, and it's easy to say that, right? But then because this is old stuff, this is Cruyff stuff, this is total football, right? You go and adapt and you push into areas where you think the space will be developed, right? But how do you know that beforehand? How do you know where that's going to develop? And does Pep kind of know that against? Has he watched the team and said, right, this is where the weakness is? Is it something a wee bit simpler? Is it they're all pretty good footballers and they're learning how to play brilliantly with each other and always want the ball and can be completely adaptable? And it might be a back three one week and it might be a 4-1 week and it might be slightly adapted. But the fact that he's brought newer ideas with not half positions but double positions, that it's now almost accepted that your left back actually might spend half the time in midfield now. That's whereas it wouldn't have been considered 2 or 3 years ago in the English game. And it's Pep that's been doing that. And I'm watching others trying it, having a go at it. Funnily enough, who was the team that did it? Sheffield United tried it. Remember, they tried it when the centre backs kept on going into midfield and overlapping all the time. Now, that's a big jump in it from Sheffield United to Man City. But you can see what the thinking is, and a lot of the coaches talk about it because there's coaching theory going on. They're all learning it. They're all looking at it all the time. But A, brave enough to do it in a major game, and B, not just doing it for the sake of it, doing it because you know it will work in a certain situation. And it was even going a goal down, it very quickly became very obvious that, oh, wait a minute, they're utterly dominant. And that completely, the first 2 goals, I think, were the classic Manchester City goals. Just get to the byline. That's what you do. Manipulate the situation, get roughly to the byline or beyond the fullbacks and the opposite side and cross it. It's the hardest ball. Everybody knows that's not new stuff. That's the hardest ball. But they manipulate that situation more often and better than anyone else. And it's usually because they get these overloads. So people get dragged all over the place. And because of it, clever enough players like De Bruyne or whatever to play that final pass into that area where you finally get the cutback, they're incredibly hard to stop. But they also is getting the best out of every single player, getting the best out of Stones now. Who'd have thought? Yeah. Who'd have thought you were going to get that? The Grealish one is no surprise whatsoever. Absolutely none. It's taken a long time to do it. And Pep's just sitting there going, yeah, I did this with Raheem Sterling. I did this with others. I'll develop it. I'll tell them what they need to do. And when they finally click and stop doing what they think they should be doing and take the base for what he's telling them and then allow themselves to grow out from it, it's brilliant to see it. I'm not surprised at it. I'd have been surprised if it didn't work, actually. Yeah. Knowing the quality that Grealish has got and knowing that Pep can get inside people's heads.
It is a wonderfully interesting time to watch football. It's a privilege to sit down. I found myself thinking on Saturday and watch this football genius have the courage and have the job security to experiment in this way. And as you said, I would love to know, and it's the one thing we never know, because they're not going to give detailed explanations of their plans pre-game for obvious reasons. But you would love to know if that game transpired the way Pep envisaged. That he spotted several things in Liverpool and he said, I've just got the thing in my back pocket. Boom, boom, boom. This is how it's going to work. And as you said, I mean, we can all review it. We can all understand it a little bit in real time and post-game, but to conjure it up and think of it and know it's the right thing to do. I mean, he is, in my lifetime, I can't speak of Cruyff, but nobody, absolutely nobody has had the impact on the game that Guardiola has had.
Yeah, well, he'll say himself, Cruyff's ideas, around about that early 70s thing was the base of all this. And then what you do is, I think, was it Xavi or Iniesta said, Cruyff built the cathedral, we just paint it, right? And it's kind of, that's the concept of it. Like, that's the ideas. Now do things with it. And Pep's gone and taken all that sort of stuff further as well. So that's, and he has taken it a lot further.
Yeah, Pep has surely built a fairly hefty extension to that cathedral, no?
A couple of domes in the end, I think.
I would think so. I would really think so.
No, absolutely, I would agree with that. It's to take nothing away from him, but you know where the root is, and then the tree can flourish, right? So that's fine. That's all good. There. The only way of finding out and answering the question you're asking just now is, you don't find it out with the players just now because they shouldn't be telling you. If they're telling you, they're wrong to tell you. The people that have worked with them before, see, the giveaway phrase is always the same. It's so often said about these types of managers, and there's damn few of them. He told me what was going to happen, and it happened. Yeah. In the game. And if that sort of manager, and the players are kind of gobsmacked, I didn't know the space was going to be there, but he told me that's where it would be and go there. And it happens. And the players just think they're spooky, And the amount of people that have said that have worked with Pep in the past, it's extraordinary how many have felt that about him, that he kind of knows the oppositions, where their strengths and weaknesses will be. And also, the element of surprise, because what you do is when you set up against Manchester City, just now, you set up with a certain thing in mind. And then they go and do something completely different. And by the way, half an hour's gone and you've maybe just about figured out what they're doing. And by the way, the game's lost at that point. Yeah. And not only lost by goals, but lost by people looking around saying, well, we can't get a kick here, we can't move, we don't know who are marking. So keeping people guessing there's no simple thing to do it. He's kind of slightly wizard-like when he does it that way. But like everyone else, he does make mistakes. But there's far fewer of them. And of course, everyone thinking before the game, well, Haaland's not playing. It's going to be difficult. And it was just kind of ridiculous. So it looks brilliant. And I was at the other game. I was watching that in the bowels of the stadium at Arsenal when that was going on. And it was very funny. The kind of I'll rephrase it. It was very upsetting when when Liverpool scored at the start and the place erupts and people are all excited. By the time the second goal and the press room with anybody who was Arsenal minded was empty. They just walked out because they knew that's not coming back.
Yeah.
And they totally understood what was happening to put a massive amount of pressure on Arsenal. But fortunately for Arsenal, they kind of lived with it. But there is certainly a bit of the Peps and Arteta as well. So it's a brilliant battle between the two.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I'll come to Arsenal now. I guess the other obvious point to make with City is when you ally the wizardry of Pep with the technical craft he has at his disposal, it's extra special. Gundogan fits the bill of unsung hero in so much as multi-Premier League winning German international footballer can. But I mean, in a glimpse, his awareness, his touch, his pass to Grealish in the build-up for the first goal, how highly do you rate him?
Yeah, I've talked to you in the past many times about how much I love David Silva, certain players and Xavi's and Iniestas. And of course, Gundogan, he doesn't look as smooth as them a lot of the time, but he does the same things a lot of the time. And he's also got a brilliant goal scoring record. Remember, couple of seasons ago, it was just unbelievable. He was the go-to man. And he has been extraordinary. I think, again, one of those players where I'd watched him before he came to City and thought, yeah, he was all right. He's okay. He just didn't jump out at you in any particular way. He was good, and he'd do some good things, and quality player. But then he turns up, and you can sit him on your bench, for 3 weeks, and he'll come back in and be the best player on the team sometimes. And it's to have that to walk on. If De Bruyne is having a quieter day, and then he walks on, you just think it's everywhere. And I think he's a player he seems to be an intelligent player, a very intelligent player. And in many ways, he is the perfect one for Pep, because Pep will say, right, I need this. And you know that he's going to take it, and you know that he's going to understand it. And he's also got that final millisecond ball that all the best Manchester City players have got. If the pass is on and it's the right pass, he'll make it. And it's a funny one because he's got that, and we know De Bruyne has got that. Mahrez has got that when he's in the kind of right mood for it. Watching Grealish, he's beginning to get that now, and he didn't necessarily have that before. And the amount of players that are growing into being able to do that, it's extraordinary. It just sounds the simplest thing in the world. But that was the thing that really annoyed me early on with Foden a couple of times, that what a player, but you're still sometimes making the wrong decision, and I don't know why you are. But they've just been cut out one by one by one by one. They were cut out, and Foden now, he's up there with the same with Gundogan as well. So at the moment, what you got to say, the Arsenal are ahead of them is absolutely incredible.
Well, indeed. So City have their mojo back. Have they left it too late? Might be the question. You mentioned you're at Arsenal 4, Leeds 1. I remember after the Reece Nelson winner against Bournemouth, we talked about the drama and the sense of mood. Could it be our year? It's starting to feel like our year. But the caveat was they could do without having to go to the emotional and physical well too often, especially over the next couple of weeks. So since that Reece Nelson winner, they dispatched of Fulham 3-0. That game was over at half-time. They beat Crystal Palace 4-1. They went out of Europe. Blessing in disguise, the ultimate cliche around that one, and now Leeds 4-1 at home. So that's just what the doctor ordered. What's your sense, given that you were there, of where they are as they keep pace, more than keep pace with City now?
Well, the last one I was at was the Brentford one, and that was tense. But the thing that jumped out at me was the fans. They were extraordinary, the way they got behind them. And I was expecting to see a really fluid performance from Arsenal against a Leeds team who expected to come out and be, quite gung-ho. It was nothing like that. Honestly, Leeds was I was so upset by them, because they kept their better players, that they needed. They kept them off the pitch for a large part of the game. They were defensive, but they broke the numbers sometimes, so we give them the due for that. But Arsenal were there for the first time in a while. That was the first 45 minutes. Was by a distance the weakest I've seen Arsenal this season.
Okay.
They were slow, they were sluggish, they weren't understanding or working with each other. They actually looked like a team that didn't really believe that much, which is a stunning thing to say for a team that just walked away with what looks like on the outside an easy win. Now, they were much better in the second half. Yes, the manager's got into them a bit, he's adapted a bit, and it always helps when you get a lead. And as soon as they got a decent lead, the second goal, it was a piece of cake, just a walk in the park for them really after that. But this sounds as if I'm having some sort of dig at Arsenal. Exactly the opposite. They've done the other thing, i.e. they've had that emotional stuff at the end of games. They've had to chase it. They've battled and got a wee bit of luck, but kept on going to the end. They've done that. They've done what you've said, which is had a couple of easy games and cruised it. And now they're doing the old not playing well but still winning quite easily. That every single pointer that you want to look at for a team that's actually capable of continuing to do that and win the league is actually there. And again, everyone's saying it. It's a cliche. They're not in Europe. Look at all the games that Manchester City have got in comparison. It's still looking to me like I need to eat quite a lot of humble pie, because I thought Manchester City would catch them. But every week that goes by, you just think a little bit less. And just at the weekend, I was at the Scotland game against Spain, obviously last week, and Tierney was unbelievable. He was just absolutely extraordinary. I mean, one of the best players in the park, better than most of the Spanish players, however much they said Scotland are rubbish, which made me smile a wee bit. And he can't get a game. He can't get a game for Arsenal. He is in phenomenal form, and he cannot get a sniff of a game for Arsenal. He came on for sub the last 5 minutes. That tells you one hell of a story. Saka, who's their go-to player at the moment for scoring goals, didn't start the game, didn't seem to make much of a difference. He came on after a while, little impact in the game, didn't make any difference. Like Manchester City, they seem to have a few players, not maybe as many City, but they've got players who can step up to the plate when they need to. It's struggling now to see where the real weakness is. Even, we've not got a centre forward for a long time. Having to put Trossard there doesn't seem to make any difference. So at the moment, it's looking very, very good for Arsenal. There was a wee bit of nervousness, by the way, I have to say, in the first half with some Arsenal fans. But I like watching football games. I also love watching crowds and listening to crowds, because they're all got their different dynamics. And the Arsenal dynamics completely changed because it was so quiet there for so long. And all this season it's been building and building. It's great. The last few games have been great. And in this game, it went really quiet for a period, and you thought, oh, don't do that. You need to get behind the team. You need to lift them. Honestly, I hadn't got a sentence out when I was doing the commentary. And there they were singing again, shouting and getting on. Now really lifting it again, as if they fully understood what was needed at that point in time. So as again, talking cliches, but it is completely true. Cliches are there for a reason, because they're genuinely true. And you need them sometimes.
It's an interesting couple of days coming up. So if you take it as 26th of April against Manchester City as looming large in the Arsenal imagination, they have Anfield on Sunday 4:30, live game, the type of game Liverpool in their strange up and down predicament will get up for, as they did against Manchester United. Now Liverpool do play against Chelsea tomorrow. Best of luck to you if you got a strong feeling about a form line there for either, but that's where they are. So Arsenal have Anfield on Sunday. They have West Ham away with the week's rest in between. They have Southampton at home, and then they'll have City on the Wednesday 26th, and then they'll have Chelsea 3 days later. Presumably Chelsea might have sorted themselves out by then. So, it's not easy by any means. Have you any great sense of what Liverpool are going to pitch up this week? We sort of brush by them in the City talk.
I'm afraid Jurgen Klopp doesn't know.
Yeah.
No, you haven't got a clue, because you look at the quality they've got. They had the big opportunity. I mean, it was Manchester City, but their stats off the top of my head was it 4 shots, 1 on target. This is Liverpool we're talking about here. This is a team which has been phenomenal for 3 or 4 years, maybe a bit more than that. And they just, when they don't have a good day, they have a stinker. And they look tired, they look disorganised sometimes. The link-ups and flows with Gakpo, 1 minute it can be brilliant, next minute it can be non-existent. You just don't know. You have no idea which one's going to turn up. They do seem to be able to lift themselves weirdly, because you asked somebody to guess that one, but 7-0, Man United? Seriously? You have no idea, no concept of it. The one thing about Liverpool is the Klopp's quite good at lifting them, and that helps a wee bit. So, when they're at a home game, it certainly lifts them. And there's enough good players there that are capable on their day of beating anyone. But it's just, you'd say it's such an interesting season. And watching Manchester United yesterday, been excited for them for a while, and then watched them yesterday and went, what? Where'd that come from? Like disinterest all the way through the team. Just Newcastle aren't that great. They're okay, and they're fighting and battling a bit. But I have to say, Liverpool, Man United, everybody out with, in fact, I'll put Brentford in there, Brighton in there as well. What you're kind of going to get from those four-ish. See with everyone else, could do just about anything. And Liverpool are in that, absolutely in that.
Yeah. It's amazing, really. Let's finish on Newcastle 2, Manchester United 0, or 4-0 on the XG, Pat, because it was that kind of a game. Newcastle up to third. They're level on points with Manchester United. They have far superior goal difference than Manchester United. They haven't finished above them in the league since 1977. So a touch of history at play. This was absolute dominance. I saw Jonathan Wilson in The Guardian at the stat. Manchester United 2.5 times more likely to lose a game when Casemiro does not play than when he does. 2.5 times more likely to lose. I saw Danny Murphy on Match of the Day last night make the point that some of this is very much on the Ten Hag setup. So he had Scott McTominay, fresh from his heroics for Scotland, of course. He was the furthest of Manchester United's middle three for most of the game. He was trying to step up on Bruno Guimaraes. And they had Bruno Fernandes and Marcel Sabitzer as the two sixes together. On Sean Longstaff was Bruno Fernandes, and Sabitzer was looking after Willock. Murphy was making the point. Bruno Fernandes and Sabitzer did not see danger, did not work in tandem. McTominay might be the more defensive minded. He's further up the pitch on Guimaraes. They did switch later on, McTominay and Bruno Fernandes, but nonetheless Murphy was making the point that setup was completely overrun, and a fair degree of blame there has to fall on Ten Hag. United are only 3 points better off than this time last year, for all the the headline news and the headline improvement.
Yeah. To be fair, it was a mess. And how much can you say in Ten Hag? He's not really. I don't know if he's even his real team yet. I honestly don't think it is. I think he needs to get a summer under his belt, getting the ones in that he wants to get in, and the ones out that he wants to get out. The McTominay one, I understand the initial concept of it. For Scotland, I was at both the games. Right, he scores 4 goals in a game and a quarter. Right, so. You understand why you're going to stick him up there a wee bit, push him forward, see if you can get anything. But you do need someone, in that base area. Sabitzer was just nothing much happening there. He wasn't destroying anything. He wasn't killing it. He wasn't seeing it. Bruno, that's not his play anyway. No. That's not his game to go back there. He was in one of his slightly stroppier moods anyway. Oddly enough, if you're going to try and work hard in the midfield, you're kind of hoping your front three, as it were, and I know they played a 4-2-3-1, but your front three, your 2 wingers and your striker are going to do a job for you. I remember thinking after about 25 minutes, they should bring Weghorst on. They really ought to. Oh dear, he is on. He never got a sniff, but then he wasn't getting any good service. Anthony was having one of those days,
Pat, is Anthony not having one of those seasons? Like, what does this guy bring to the party, really?
I'm not a huge fan. I haven't been a huge fan. He has got skill. He does the same trick the vast majority of the time. He does the same thing, and now and again, he's one of those players you will always remember the goals, because he cuts in and he slews them in at the top corner and look brilliant. But see, one of them goals, they count the same as a tap-in.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of the season, let's see how many you've created and let's see how many you've scored. Certainly, he's playing against a defender I thought would be made for him, but he was bullied out of the game. There were a couple of nice touches now and again, but I have to say, I think he has to get somebody to tell him to start adapting his game a little bit. In the Premier League, there's good defenders, but there's good technicians. They'll say, right, this is what he does. This is how we stop him. Start doing something different. The more concerning was Marcus Rashford, because he had that face on again. The one that he had earlier before Ronaldo left, where he looked a bit fed up with things and I'm not in a very good place just now, etc. I immediately wondered, well, he wants to be playing up front. He doesn't want to be playing out wide just now. Maybe there was something in that. Maybe that was part of the reasoning behind it as well. But the whole, I can't think of any of that 5 that we're talking about, 5 or 6, mid to front, who actually had a decent game. And certainly McTominay, I'll give you, I'm biased anyway, but he'll put a shift in.
Yes, he will.
I know what card for you. I mean, I know he'll always do that. But did anyone else have a particularly good game of that group? No, absolutely not. And watching the problems that Dalot was having at right back, against San Maximan, who is half the player he was last season, but was still good enough to cause Dalot all sorts of problems, was extraordinary.
Yes. I have to say, I was surprised how stroppy Bruno Fernandes was, hot on the heels of Anfield.
Yeah. It's funny because when you're missing, with Fred not being there and you've not got the main man sitting behind you, Casemiro, you've got to step up a wee bit and, almost act like pure captaincy material and say, right, come on, lads, get us together. And it didn't. He wasn't looking at anyone else. He was just inside his own head a lot of the time. But, teams can have that. They had a bad day at the office, from back to front. And it was quite surprising, though, because it's not really been like that too often sort of recently. And he'll put that down to that one bad day. We will find out soon enough if it is that one-off. But
yeah,
I would say that's quite concerning.
It's starting to be a bad month. Bad month.
No, and again, it could be because you get lifts at certain points in time. As long as he sees that coming, because there's good players there. You can get more out of Rashford. You need to get more out of him. That period of time when he was scoring every single game, remember, it's not that long ago. He's had a wee bit of an injury. He's come back. But you need to get him firing again. If he's firing again, he's dragging the whole team forward because he's a danger in behind. Every time he gets the ball, you think he's capable of scoring. And then suddenly everybody's 20 yards up and it's an easier game to play. When that's not happening and you're just basically defending all the time, and you've got people who are, Bruno's not a great defender, Anthony's not a good defender, Rashford wasn't going back to defend, and how good is Sabitzer as a defender? Yeah,
how good is he generally? He looks a bit, he doesn't stick out as being not at that level, but he certainly doesn't stick out as having any impact at that level. He's like invisible.
Harsh though it may seem, I would agree with you. I don't think he's going to be a world-class player. Yeah. he's a sticking plaster for a period of time.
Yes.
And that's what he feels like. And sometimes in extremis you need to get somebody in who'd do a job for you. And he looks like a kind of a job player. Problem is, due to injuries, etc., he's been asked to do a little bit more than that. And, again, decent-ish player, but not the Manchester United standard of player, and certainly not a player who in a struggling team is going to lift him.
Okay. We will have an interesting conversation next week. We'll see how Arsenal go at Anfield, Liverpool, Chelsea tomorrow. Pat, thanks so much.
Pleasure as ever.
Cheers. Pat Nevin with us on the line there on Monday Night Football here and Off the Ball, brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.